that they truly are, and this is just some like aberrant behavior, but like, hey, just get back, like, why can't this man return to the man that I knew, right? And as you said, it was always a mirage. Or maybe she was overlooking a lot of things, right? We're like, well, how could she have more children? And it's like, again, maybe he is love bombing again, but you believe that that initial version of the person that you met is always going to be that person.
It's also like there are two contradictory societal narratives at once, which is that as a woman in particular in a heterosexual relationship, you are encouraged to try to fix relationships, especially if you have children with a man in a relationship. If you're a woman, you are actually like by the court ordered to try to repair that relationship versus cut that person off. And so through the court system, like abusive relationships that involve children are essentially mandated. We mandate that victims like remain in close proximity with their abuser. We mandate that they like share childcare responsibilities with them. And oftentimes we mandate through our legal system that they spend like extended periods of time immersed in their abuser's life, in their homes, in their ideologies. And so I think that like once Grimes passed that point, she was kind of trapped. And that's not even like taking into account the fact that, contrary to popular belief, Grimes and Elon were never married. He doesn't owe her anything. First time she was pregnant with X, that was a really big deal. Like, as a fan still at the time who was like, I hate this relationship, I want them to break up, when she announced she was pregnant with his baby, I was like, fuck. Like, this is now forever.
What does this mean? What does this mean for my relationship to Vision specifically?
I was just like, I remember kind of watching helplessly from the sidelines because I was like, you know, at the time when Grimes and Elon's relationship was starting to develop, there was also simultaneously like the emergence of Elon Musk's radicalization in the public eye. I was like, this is so bad. Like, she needs to break up with this horrible man. And instead, they had a kid together. That was a whole public ordeal, particularly around, like, they give the child this keyboard smash name. Then for the second and the third child, for whatever reason, and this is like a big red flag, they tried to hide them. They tried to, like, hide those pregnancies from the public. A reporter discovered that they had either the second or third child. They did an interview at Grimes' house and they heard the baby crying. And they're like, did you and Elon have another baby? And we now know that Elon does this with different women. He encourages them, as the relationship is clearly not equitable, as there are clearly signs of like abuse or coercion or whatever in the relationship, he's also like, let's have another baby. So he's done that to multiple women now, and he definitely did that to Grimes.
Yeah, and we've been talking about them having an abusive dynamic, and I want to talk a little bit about the specifics of some of the things that she alleges. So, like you mentioned, they have these 3 kids, X, the next one is X the Dark Side Rail, the next one is Techno Mechanicus. I've riffed enough about the name thing. I feel like online and on this podcast, I don't need to talk more about the names. I don't like the names. I don't like the situation they create for the children who have no agency in what they're called. I don't like names. But shortly after their 3rd child, Techno Mechanicus, is born, they split and enter into this custody battle. And Kat, you were reading some of the legal documents, as you love to do. Would you like to shed any light on what they revealed to you?
Yes. So around this time, after Grimes had X, which is nothing to say of his full name, after Grimes had that kid, people in her fandom in particular were starting to get really worried, because this is around the time that you started to see tweets and stuff that suggested bad things were happening behind the scenes with Elon and Grimes. And the custody battle like kicked into effect because Grimes was trying to get a legal sort of parental arrangement, like acknowledging that Elon is the father of these 3 children so that she can have legal rights to them. And what we know from like the court documents themselves and like the official narrative is supplemented by the fact that Grimes will often tweet, and often she'll delete them, but like Grimes frequently tweets and gives these little like bits and pieces of insight into like what her portrayal of these events are. But after she starts trying to go through the courts to establish like parenthood, then they start disputing over whether the children live in California or Texas. And the custody battle is in Texas. So Grimes wanted to move it to California and said that the youngest two children were with her full-time in California and that the only child who was in Texas was X. And X is the one who Elon constantly is parading around in public, has him on his shoulders, has him in the White House. Like, from the time that he was a little boy, X has been like the very public child who Elon takes around with him. And it is super bizarre. And like Grimes has hinged kind of her argument around this, that it is like not what she wants as his mother, and it is like not consistent with the other children, the way that he parades X around specifically. And it's like he has children who are X's age with other women who he's not doing this with. It's like he picked this one kid, and in the custody battle, Grimes is like, I haven't seen X for 5 months. I can't see my son. I don't want him to have this level of public visibility, but Elon won't comply with my wishes. And the custody battle is really, really ugly. A lot of it is sealed from public view, most of it is, but she reveals on Twitter, she says that like her modeling photos were used against her in the courtroom. Like she basically said that Elon used, like, probably tried to portray her as like sexually promiscuous, which is just like so gross, but such a common thing used against mothers in custody battles. What she like described happening is so consistent with what women from all backgrounds and like all histories and experiences go through in custody battles. She said she was going bankrupt because of like these custody battles. She said that like Elon obviously has the most resources out of everyone in the world. He is the richest person on the planet, and she was like, I have such a difficult time fighting this against him. And she also said at that point that it was like someone who she no longer recognized as compared to the man who she had met. And she basically said that like she was fighting to stop her kids from getting taken away from her. Another really interesting thing during sort of this whole custody battle era, which did wrap up finally with some sort of settlement, but as this was all going on, Grimes' mother actually tweeted at Elon and was like, Grimes is trying to take the kids to see her dying grandmother, and you will not like relinquish them to her or give her their like passport documentation so that they can do this. Like, please don't do something. This is breaking my daughter's heart and my mother's heart. And with all of this stuff being so publicly out there, I just have always found it so like surreal and ultimately unsurprising, but very disappointing that people don't like talk about how blatant all of this like mistreatment of his kids and Grimes and her family is, and how like egregious it is that she has so little resources compared to him, and that he's like putting her and the children through all of this.
Yeah, and just because I can already read the comments litigating how much sympathy or scrutiny towards Grimes is too much, I want to be clear and say that there is a reason, a very valid reason, that so many queer people reacted so negatively towards Grimes' inclusion in the World Pride lineup. Grimes has, co-signed and espoused some really shitty political views that we're gonna get into in a bit, and at the same time, she's in this truly nightmarish situation inside this relationship with the father of her children. I don't think those things, by the way, are entirely separate either, which we're gonna get into in a second, but I do think people can and probably should have conflicting feelings about them. And I'm not asking anyone to reconcile those feelings necessarily, but I think it's worth noting that they can all exist at the same time.
Yeah, and it just goes back to also, I just have to say again too what I said before, which is that like you don't know what a relationship is like until you're in it. Women especially are taught to compartmentalize and to, as everything Kat said earlier, it's like you're pressured, especially once you have a child, to be together and to fix it. And if that guy keeps giving you, which it sounds like he does, is like he's such a manipulator. He's giving these women, especially Grimes, like these like tastes of him as they once knew him when they met.
I would like to take a quick break from the show to give a shout out to Rocket Money for sponsoring this podcast and making episodes like this possible. And for, being a very useful app that might be especially useful to you as we head into the new year and you might be looking over your budgets. It's happened to all of us, right? Where you sign up for something, whether it be a streaming service, a news subscription, an OnlyFans, and then you eventually stop using it, but you forget to unsubscribe. So you keep getting charged for it quietly in the background for no reason. But the subscriptions that you're paying for every month don't need to be a mystery hidden in the folds of credit card bills. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money will show you all of your subscriptions that you're paying for each month and help you cancel the ones you don't want anymore with just one click. In the app, you get a dashboard where you can see everything in one place, you can create budgets, and you get notified when your subscription prices increase. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved over $500 million in unwanted subscriptions. And it saves its members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. If you want to start budgeting and saving for the new year, you can do that. Head over to rocketmoney.com/fruity. That's rocketmoney.com/fruity. Now, let's get back to the episode. And while we're complicating this all, let's talk about Grimes' own political radicalization. And maybe speculate on what about this arena of far-right personalities was interesting to her. Because while, to be clear, obviously, I vehemently disagree with how she chooses to spend her time nowadays, I kind of always think, and it's a running theme on the show, that perhaps the most productive thing we can do is ask how and why.
I think what we see is as Elon starts to get radicalized, you start to see Grimes's politics evolve as well. And you also see her start to talk quite negatively about the media and to fight with the media. In 2021, she does this photo shoot where she's kind of trying to troll the media, where she's dressed up in this like typical Grimes kind of crazy outfit, and then she's reading the Communist Manifesto. And this is when she was getting a lot of media criticism for being with Elon and enabling him, because 2021 is when he really kicked off like the really awful transphobic stuff and just sort of started to make his more extreme beliefs more publicly known. And so you see her kind of feeding against that. People were like, oh my God, like, is she sending a message, or what is this? But I think I started to see signs of like resentment of the media and like resentment of her public image. And you see her also starting to fight more with people in the replies. Like, people will say something to her and she's like, well, that's not, you don't understand what's going on, or like, she's clearly frustrated. And I've written so much about this, and I've experienced it myself. Like, when you see false information about yourself publicly, or when you feel like part of your story is not being told, or you're being chastised in the media, it is such a radicalizing force. I do think, like, with her, she probably felt, I don't want to say persecuted, but I do think that she felt this resentment. And that resentment, if you start to go down that road, you are fed into the right-wing pipeline. Like, the right is so good at taking that resentment and being like, you're right. And by the way, the media is evil. And by the way, all these people canceling you are evil. Well, see what I mean? Woke people will turn on you. This is da. And so you see her starting to affiliate with more of these like counterculture, like these right-wing extremists. That's what they are.
Yeah.
I don't want to excuse it. It's bad. It's lazy. She shouldn't do this, right? Like, you should recognize, like, okay, these people are also grifting off me. They also will throw me under the bus the minute I'm not politically expedient. But when you're feeling lonely, which I imagine she was, you're feeling completely isolated, and then also endearing yourself to these far-right radicals, also kind of endears yourself to Elon, who's increasingly in those circles. I just see how that she started to go down that path.
I think that, like, throughout Grimes's career and what we've talked about, you see, like, the perfect conditions for radicalization form. Because, like we talked about at the very beginning, when Grimes emerged as a musician, I think she was undeniably extremely talented, but was often sort of not given her due and had kind of this tense back and forth with the media, like, broadly speaking, because I think she also dealt with a lot of misogyny and sexism from the media and from parts of the media that are not, like, the same parts of the media that are calling her out now. But I think a lot of people in that position just sort of naturally start to associate anything that falls under the umbrella of the media with, like, negative, bad treatment they've gotten. And to some degree, like you said, Taylor, I think that for a lot of women in the public eye, that is fair, because a lot of times as women in the public eye, even the best media outlets still treat you through a misogynistic lens. So I think coming into her relationship with Elon, Grimes was already sort of in this, like, standoff with the media. The way her relationship gets covered, I think, really, like, upset her. And then as the relationship in her personal life starts to really visibly become abusive, I think like you see a lot of effects and consequences of that that only further open her up to radicalization. For example, during the custody battle, she tweeted that her daily schedule would be like sleeping, eating, crying, and going to court. And I just think that someone who is in that kind of survival mode where it feels like the world is against you, and in the case of fighting the richest man on the planet for your children, the world kind of is stacked against you. Like, I can see why she became so vulnerable that, like, it was just perfect breeding ground for radicalization. And I'll also say that, like, that's not an excuse because a lot of people who are in really heinous, horrible situations do not become radicalized.
Right. Right.
I think this more has to do with like the path she went down and the path Elon went down are both because of like who they are, and she's not like a violent, abusive individual in the same way that he is, but she like has co-signed on this rhetoric, and some of the really bad stuff that she's done over the years has included like following white supremacist neo-Nazis on Twitter.
She also starts to like physically hang out with these people.
I was gonna say it's not just Twitter
Because
follows.
following, I don't want to be the follow police. Because like I
You follow everyone.
drives me insane. Because I write about right wing influencers. Of course I follow them. I monitor everything they do, and every day I have some new person in my DMs. Why do you follow this person? I'm like, well, I write about them. What's way more concerning to me, and I do think that you can deduce a certain amount of information about someone from the people that they follow, because that is the information. You can tell kind of their information diet. But she also starts to hang out with these people socially.
Right, that's what I was going to mention. I mean, she's like there's write-ups about her friendship with Curtis Yarvin, who is this avowed
Race scientist.
white supremacist. Yeah, he's a eugenicist. On January 19th, the night before the inauguration, she was DJing a sort of like MAGA hangout party. She's on Twitter, all the time defending Elon. Someone just a couple weeks ago said, "Girl, please, you were in love with a Nazi." And she just responded to that person, quote, "Hysteria will get you nowhere," and told them to read Confucius and study history.
We did study history. That's the problem.
Right.
I wish that she would just admit it. I wish that she would just acknowledge it. But I think she's into denial, and I think she feels resentment. Because again, when you're in love with someone and you're in love with someone, you have kids with someone, and then you see yourself being hated, like, I don't know, it's hard. We all want to defend ourselves online, and we all think of ourselves as like doing the right thing and the moral thing. And I just feel like she's gone down this path so far that it's, a tweet is not going to get her out of it. Also, I just want to say, like, the MAGA stuff, like, especially the inauguration, I mean, I was at a lot of these inauguration events and stuff, because I was writing about it. Again, their goal is to radicalize people and to bring people into a movement. And so you see this a lot where somebody sort of starts to associate, or they're in this vulnerable spot, and you see the right just like vultures, like seize on them. Again, because they're opportunists that don't actually give a shit, but this person is vulnerable, and then you see the anger, like the anger from the left, rightfully so, and that kind of pushes them. And that doesn't mean that it's the left. I hate when people say, "Oh, well, that's left's fault." Like, "Oh, you should. That's why we should be nicer to people." No, that was weird. No, but I think we have to be realistic and recognize these conditions that people are radicalized under.
It reminds me really significantly, like, over the past few years, like since 2018, since like the height of the Me Too movement, I have noticed multiple women who were like high profile accusers in the Me Too movement who have been radicalized, and radicalized hard. Tara Reid is like a really good example because she is like literally like in Russia. And I think Rose McGowan also has like said some pretty concerning stuff. At first, when I saw these women getting radicalized, it confused me because I was like, how could you be drawn to such a like toxic and like patriarchal demographic? But I think what I eventually realized is that like what these women experienced when they came forward is they saw that same patriarchal misogyny from the left. And that is why they got pushed to the right, because unfortunately the reality is there is like no justice in any sense for women who go through these types of situations. Like, a lot of victims understand that it is not like a left or right thing. It's like just because the left mistreats you doesn't mean the right's going to treat you any better. But a lot of victims do fall prey to this. Like, they are sort of vulnerable to this radicalization. And I've seen examples of this where it's like, I'm like, well, this guy who you now love is a victim blamer. And they're like, but not to me. Like, they're like, but this person showed me kindness. And no one is showing me any kindness. And it's like, it's really sad to, like, see this happen. And I hate it. But it's like, it all comes back to the fact that I think, bottom line, like, these men, Elon Musk and, like, his cronies, are manipulators. They're manipulators. And it's like, that's the, like, most important takeaway from this, is that he's now done this to so many women, Grimes and others, that it ceases to be about who these women are as individuals, and it's more so about just like, oh, it's the same pattern of abuse. And Elon Musk is abusing all of us now in his position. So it's like, it just is who he is to his core, and he'll do it to any woman he can.
Again, in my own head, I find myself coming back to this point of, what is the right amount of sympathy? What is the right amount of scrutiny? How do I hold these things at the same time? Because on one hand, right, and this is what people bring up a lot, Grimes will somewhat regularly go out of her way, especially on Twitter, to defend Elon. Like, just in January, there was this tweet, let me find it. She was sparring with some random person on Twitter, and continuing to claim that, like, Elon is still this, like, climate change warrior, despite, obviously, like, joining the worst presidential administration the climate has literally ever known. So she continues to do this sort of, like, laundering of Elon's image for reasons that don't quite make sense. But then at the same time, like, a month later, she tweeted, let me find this one. She tweeted directly at Elon Musk. Here it is, from the 20th of February. At Elon Musk, please respond about our child's medical crisis. I am so sorry to do this publicly, but it is no longer acceptable to ignore this situation. This requires immediate attention. If you don't want to talk to me, can you please designate or hire someone who can, so that we can move forward on solving this? This is urgent, Elon. I'm not giving any details, but he won't respond to texts, calls, or emails, and has skipped every meeting. And our child will suffer lifelong impairment if he doesn't respond ASAP, so I need him to fucking respond. And if I have to apply public pressure, then I guess that's where we're at. Like, it goes without saying that that's pretty fucking horrifying.
I would not ask anyone to feel sympathetic for Grimes, because there are a number of reasons why you may not want to be sympathetic toward her. But I do think that, like, in noting that, we can also recognize that victims don't have to be sympathetic, and that the way that Elon Musk is victimizing these women, Grimes included, is also reflective of the way that he is victimizing the country at large through all the other actions that he takes in his personal and his professional life. And I think with Grimes and defending Elon specifically, it's like, we can look at this behavior sort of objectively for what it is, and it's like, this is a man who has only ever, like, persistently hurt Grimes, and so for her to come out and defend him after all of that is not a rational position for her to take. It's coming from an irrational place. And so just because victims act, you know, in some situations irrationally or in a way that is, like, consequential to others, you know, we don't have to separate those things out from each other. They can exist at the same time. She can be coming from a place where she's reacting to an abusive relationship, and her statement on its own can have negative and harmful consequences. This is actually, like, a very frequent facet of, like, domestic violence cases, is that there are cascading consequences that affect everybody around the relationship. And so I think that that is true of Grimes. And I also think that, like, if we just end the conversation at she's an irredeemable person and we don't feel bad for her, then we're not doing anything to challenge, like, the rhetoric that underlines Elon's ability to abuse all of these different women. I also think it's important to point out, because I refer to the behavior as, like, rational versus irrational, some things appear irrational to us because we are not privy to what is going on in that relationship. So, for example, this is just a hypothetical, like, sometimes within abusive relationships, behind closed doors, the way that abusers treat their victims is they see how far they can push them and things that they can get them to say and do, sometimes publicly, to sort of, like, it's part of the process of coercive control. victims will oftentimes like privately and publicly respond with like the fawn response, which is to like tell the abuser that they're a good person, tell them that like they're not being abused, like deny that the abuse is happening, because it's a way of like maybe making sure that the abuser stays calm and doesn't become angry and doesn't flip out on you, or maybe it's a way of like bargaining to try to get things like being able to see your children, for example, or getting your abuser to respond to you if like your child is having a medical emergency. With like the tweeting at Elon, we don't really know what's going on in that relationship because the parties who have knowledge of it haven't told us. All we can really do as bystanders is like guess, and that is a really imperfect way of like handling this situation. But I think that because it's the one we're all in together, you see how people just repeatedly do not give victims the benefit of the doubt. They actually tend to like villainize victims and like cast the worst possible like guess of what is going on in that situation and project that onto the victim. So I think like knowing what we know, it's fair to say that there are probably elements to Grimes' behavior that involve factors we are not privy to and may make her look more sympathetic or may at least provide like context that we don't have.
Well, and speaking of behavior that seems from the outside pretty irrational and like straight up bizarre, did you guys see the tweet about the video games? She tweeted about Elon like being good at video games. Here's the tweet from January 18th. Just for my personal pride, I would like to state that the father of my children was the first American druid. I'm sorry, I don't know video games. I'm sorry if I fuck up these words. Was the first American druid in Diablo to clear the abattoir of Zir and ended that season as the best in the USA. He was also ranking in Polytopia and beat Felix himself at the game. I did observe these things with my own eyes. There are other witnesses who can verify this. That is all.
She ended up with egg on her face with this because then it came out that like he did actually, I think, like have someone playing for him or something. But I was like, did he make her tweet that? When I saw that, I thought it was so incredibly bizarre. And I don't know if it came from a place of like all of the sort of hypotheticals are equally dark, where it's like either she noticed that this is something that was really bothering him on the internet and she's trying to curry favor by espousing this ultimately like kind of false information about like how great he is, or he asked her to back him up because at that point he had not come clean. There was now ended up being irrefutable evidence that he cheated.
On the video game?
On the video game, yeah.
Oh.
He had like had someone play for him or something, because basically somebody that actually knows about video games did this like YouTube investigation and found out that like there was no way that you could play this amount of hours at these times or whatever. And so then he kind of sort of admitted it, and people were like, Grimes, you're such a liar. But it just like, to me, when you see that stuff, it's so sad. There's an audience of one for that tweet, which is Elon, and it's again her sort of lashing out, sort of like flailing in public, trying to get him to respond to her, respect her, trying to get favor with him. Like, what he put her through financially, emotionally, and the way he takes, X is obviously his favorite child, and he has latched on to X and brings X everywhere in the public eye, which she obviously doesn't like, and it's this constant reminder of control, and that's your child. Imagine having your child, which you have to watch publicly, be paraded around.
I do think we can be like, oh, this woman is problematic, and also be like, oh, it's like so objectively horrifying that people online, everyone kind of agrees that Elon is carrying X around as like a human shield. Imagine if that is your child, and not only do you have to see everyone basically say that like your kid is gonna get assassinated, which is not an impossible thing to happen, but also like his father is not letting you even see him. Like, it is so dystopian and horrifying. What Grimes is living through is a straight up horror movie, and what all of like Elon's baby, the women who have his children, what they're all living through is like a horror movie. And they don't all have to be like good people for that to be the case. The whole thing is wild. It's like, it feels very like palace intrigue-y. Like you're getting this window into the lives of these people, and I don't know how reflective that is of what's really going on inside. But it does remind me also, the last thing I wanted to say, which is, I don't know if you guys have seen that thread, and it's like someone on Twitter was creating like a version of Elon and all the women who are mothers of his children and comparing them to like a royal dynasty like tropes. And they were like, Grimes is like his ultimate love, but she faces the worst punishment because she refuses to conform. Siobhan is like the one who plays the game the best, and she like, her son ultimately gets picked to be like the next person in line. And like, they're doing all the different women who Elon has been with. And Grimes responded to this and was like, LOL. And I was just like, this is so sad. This is dystopian. It's like so reminiscent of historical fiction and how like kings have wives and concubines and all of this historical stuff. And I'm like, this isn't okay that this is happening. And we shouldn't be like glorifying it or like treating it as it's just like palace intrigue about rich, weird people. Like, it's kind of like it's like an act of gender violence that's like happening in front of us, involving the richest and most influential people in the world. I think that ultimately the biggest story here is not really like whether or not Grimes is a person who is redeemable, but rather that Elon Musk is a person who is currently unaccountable. And I think that what is like so often lost is that to consistently oppose abusers and to consistently support victims, that involves cases that are morally gray. And I think that like it actually more frequently comes off morally gray than it comes off nice and easy, because the victim is like so great and easy to support and the abuser is so easy to hold accountable. Like, I think with these cases, they're so frequently framed as like the outliers because of how rich and famous and celebrity the people involved are. And while I don't want to discount the role that like privilege and other like all these different forms of privilege carry in this situation, one consistent theme throughout this episode has been like, what Grimes is experiencing, it's the same playbook, it's the same pattern as any abusive relationship. Love bombing, like hiding who you really are, turning into a different person, the way that the courts and custody system have been weaponized against her. These are things that every victim faces. And so it's never about like the individual victim and their strengths and weaknesses, but rather it's about what abuse is and what we can do about it. And what we can do about it is we can like acknowledge it, because you can walk away and be like, I still hate her, I hate everything about her, she's the worst person in the world. As long as you are still like, but he is abusing her, that's still a positive step in the right direction. Because we can't do anything about like victimhood and abuse if we can't even agree on a common definition of what victimhood and abuse are.
Ay, what a ride. What a ride. Grimes, the web that you weave. The web that you've been weaving since you sunk your alien claws in me 13 years and 2 months ago when I first heard Oblivion. I certainly could not have predicted then that we'd all end up here now. And you know, sometimes when I shut my eyes, I'm 15 again, in the closet, in my childhood bedroom, reblogging photos of you with some good old DIY plans. Take me back! Taylor and Kat, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
I'm so glad we got to talk about this.
And thank you. I don't know, maybe all of my episodes are this like roller coastery, but maybe it's because of my personal relationship to Grimes, to be clear, a parasocial one, but one that I've been fostering for over a decade. Maybe this just felt so heavy, and you know, I think objectively it is. So thank you for making it this far. If you have, thanks for listening to this podcast. Once again, if you would like to experience the podcast live, experience our conversations live, and are in a city where we're doing the show, please come through. I'm so excited. Take care of yourself, please, so we can all see each other through the other side of this madness when it's over, and it will be. I love you, and until next time, stay fruity. Everyone wanted to look like Kylie. Kylie wanted to look like a black woman, and now Kylie doesn't even want to look like Kylie. I feel like I look like a fraternity brother on his way to like the fraternity brunch where but everyone's closeted and they're all like having sex behind the scenes. They're all cheating on their girlfriends with each other. The little sweater wrapped around their neck. An image of a MAGA youth has emerged in the months leading up to and following the 2024 election. And it isn't young dorks wearing sweat and grease stained polos, looking like they just left their mom's basement for the first time in 3 weeks to pick up some tiki torches from Party City and chant, "Jews will not replace us." No, they look like a cheap copy of Reagan era 80s Republicans. Instead of polo, they're wearing Shein. They're frat bros pairing suits with MAGA hats. They're clean girls with little black dresses and good blowouts and long skincare routines. They're old money with a vape. It's a drastic change from what felt cool 10 years ago. This aesthetic phenomenon came to a head last week when New York Magazine released its new issue, with a photo on the cover from a pre-inauguration party for influencers who helped Donald Trump get elected. The photo features many men and a few women, all white, looking straight out of an 80s country club, until you squint and notice the high noons and the TikTok napkins. In today's episode, I want to explore this theatrical shift in conservative aesthetics. What feels new and what feels to me a little bit Hitler Youth adjacent, with a specific focus on what's drawing young women into what they'd call not republicanism, but the MAGA movement. And today, to do that, our